And she was,
glad
and
she's here.
you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Well, it was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so grateful for the marriage I have to this amazing woman behind me.
You've admitted.
In one of the most intense exchanges of the hearing, Senator Tim Kaine confronts Pete Hegseth over his personal conduct, judgment, and honesty as a nominee for Secretary of Defense. What begins as questions about a 2017 incident quickly escalates into a deeper examination of character, accountability, and trust. At stake is not just one man's past, but whether personal judgment matters when leading the most powerful military in the world.
I want to return to the incident that you referenced a minute ago that occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged, fully investigated, and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime. That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared? Senator, how is that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she was, and you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
it was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so grateful for the marriage I have to this amazing woman behind me.
You've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything?
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
Again,
how do you explain your judgment?
Completely false charges against me.
You
fully investigated, and I was completely clear.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So you
talking about a hypothetical.
So you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge, that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, not a perfect person, not claiming to be.
But no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being Secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
your attorney
those
used
false
the
claims,
phrase.
I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us. And I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
This exchange between Senator Tim Kaine and Pete Hegseth is not about scandal, sensationalism, or personal humiliation. It is about standards, and whether those standards still apply equally when someone seeks extraordinary power. Kaine's questioning is deliberately focused, not to relitigate the past for its own sake, but to determine whether judgment, honesty, and accountability remain essential qualifications for leading the Department of Defense. From the outset, Kaine rejects the idea that legal clearance alone is sufficient. The military does not measure leadership by whether conduct narrowly avoids criminal liability. Service members are disciplined every day for actions that are technically legal, but fundamentally incompatible with trust, command responsibility, and good order. By repeatedly insisting that he was fully investigated and completely cleared, Hegseth frames accountability as a binary legal outcome. Kaine exposes the flaw in that logic. Leadership is not governed by the lowest possible standard of behavior, especially in an institution built on discipline and moral authority. As the exchange unfolds, the focus shifts from the incident itself to what it reveals about character. Cheating on a spouse, violating personal vows, entering private settlements, and relying on non-disclosure agreements may not violate criminal statutes, but they speak directly to judgment and transparency. Kaine's questions draw a straight line between personal decision-making and professional responsibility, underscoring that the Secretary of Defense would be responsible for enforcing the Uniform Code of Military Justice, a system that demands far stricter conduct from subordinates than the nominee appears willing to apply to himself. What becomes increasingly striking is Hegseth's consistent refusal to answer direct questions about disqualification standards. When asked whether certain actions would disqualify someone else from serving as Secretary of Defense, he repeatedly labels them hypotheticals. Kaine pushes back, noting that domestic violence, abuse of authority, and personal misconduct are not hypothetical at all. They are real, persistent problems within both civilian society and the military. A leader who cannot clearly state where the line is drawn leaves dangerous ambiguity in a system that depends on clarity and moral certainty. The exchange reaches its most consequential point when Kaine addresses disclosure. Hegseth acknowledges that he did not inform the president-elect or the transition team about the incident, investigation, settlement, or cash payment during the nomination process. This omission is not a technical oversight. It goes to the heart of trust. Civilian leadership depends on complete candor from those seeking power. Choosing silence because disclosure might hurt your chances raises the question of whether future advice, decisions, or warnings would be shaped by political self-preservation rather than national interest. Kaine's questioning also exposes a broader institutional concern: the growing gap between the standards imposed on rank-and-file service members and those applied to senior leaders. Enlisted personnel and officers alike are routinely held accountable for conduct that reflects poorly on the service, regardless of criminal liability. When nominees argue that personal behavior is irrelevant unless a crime is proven, it sends a corrosive message down the chain of command that power shields accountability rather than increasing it. This moment is not about denying redemption or faith, nor is it about demanding personal perfection. It is about responsibility. The Secretary of Defense is not merely an administrator or a political figurehead. The role carries command influence, moral authority, and life and death consequences. Decisions made at the top ripple outward, shaping culture, discipline, and trust throughout the armed forces. By the end of the exchange, Senator Kaine has not pronounced judgment. Instead, he leaves the audience confronting a deeper and more uncomfortable question. If the military demands integrity, honesty, and accountability from everyone else, should the individual entrusted with ultimate civilian control over the armed forces be held to anything less? That unresolved tension is what makes this exchange so powerful. It challenges whether character is still a core qualification for national security leadership, or whether it has become an obstacle to be minimized, reframed, or explained away in the pursuit of power.